Welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed our reading of chapter 12 of Tolliver's Secret yesterday. Today, we're going to pick back up where we left off and read the last chapter of Tolliver's Secret. So, if you remember, Ellen was finally able to deliver the bread to Mr. Shannon. She also ends the chapter by getting a long deserved rest. So, let's see where she's at now. Just like we've been doing, I'm going to ask you questions as I'm reading, so I'll stop to let you guys think about the answers to those questions. I'll also be sharing with you some things that I'm thinking about while I'm reading. At the end of the video, you'll get an opportunity to see what the answers to some of those questions were. So let's jump right into chapter 13 of Tolliver's Secret. Long before sunrise, Mrs. Shannon brought Ellen's dry clothes to her. The shoes were still wet, but her feet would be snug in an extra pair of woolen stockings. No more adventures today, Ellen, she said as she stirred up a good fire and put a breakfast of hot porridge and sausages on the table. Mr. Shannon came in and sat beside Ellen while she ate. The courier left last night, Ellen, he told her, with the bread in his saddlebag. By now, the second courier should be near the third man. It takes a chain of people to carry a message across the countryside quickly. So the author said there, it takes a chain of people to carry a message across the countryside quickly. I wonder what that means. I'm thinking that possibly it's easier if multiple people delivered messages instead of one, in case anything went wrong or in case anybody got tired. It's dangerous, isn't it, said Ellen, to ride through enemy country. Well, he admitted, it is dangerous, but it's no more dangerous than fighting in the army. I'm too old to fight. Most of us are old men or women who carry messages sewn in their clothes, or boys too young to fight. He leaned over and patted her arms as he smiled at her. Or a girl like you. Your link in the chain didn't break, Ellen. We're all glad about that. It was worth going through all the troubles of yesterday to hear him say that. Mr. Shannon carried a burning torch to light their way through the little river that went from Elizabeth to the bay a half a mile away. At the dock, several boats were being loaded with barrels of food for the market house in New York. We'll send you home with Grimsby. He's our good friend, said Mr. Shannon. He's taking a big load of Christmas greens to town. But when the war is over, Mr. Shannon added, we hope you'll come back for a peaceful visit to Elizabeth. Will you come and bring your grandfather? Oh, yes, Ellen promised. You may be sure of that. She felt the Shannons were good friends. Mr. Shannon spoke to the two leather-faced sailors. Take good care of this youngster. This is a very special person. So at that point, I'm thinking, how do you think that Ellen feels? So I'm going to give you a second again to pause and think about this question. How do you think that Ellen feels when Mr. Shannon says, this is a very special person? Grimsby and Gallup, let's continue reading. Grimsby and Gallup made a seat for her among the bundles of pine and spruce boughs. There's a brisk breeze this morning, they told her while they covered her legs with greens. Won't take long to get back to New York. The sky grew pink and the torches sputtered out. They were off. In no time, the boat sailed down the little river past the swampy marshes and the big wharves at the shore. It was not long before Ellen recognized the shoreline of Staten Island. Why, we sailed past here yesterday, she said to herself. We must have been quite near Elizabeth before we sailed on to Perth Amboy. She shrugged her shoulders the way grandfather sometimes shrugged his. But I never would have seen how the enemy is getting ready in Perth Amboy. Mr. Shannon wanted me to tell him about that. The day turned out to be a cheerful one with a great arch of blue sky and bright sun overhead. Not at all like yesterday, except for the man singing. Ellen liked to listen to the songs Grimsby and Gallup sang while they handled the sails and the tiller of the old boat. Sing right up, boy, Grimsby called to her. Oh, my name is Captain Kidd. Who has sailed, he sang out. Ellen sang the refrain. Who has sailed, who has sailed. At first she sang the refrains in a small voice, and then in a loud one as she began to enjoy the sound of her singing, even though she didn't understand some of the words. They sang On the Banks of the Dee and the Yankee Doodle and the Revolutionary Tea. It was exciting to sing Yankee songs as they sailed past the British ships anchored near the shores of Staten Island. Ellen was standing by the mast, singing at the top of her voice, when their scow sailed past the East River and wound its way among the boats that were anchored there. Snow lay white on the roofs of the garbled houses, and the sun glinted from the church spires. New York looked so good, she said to Grimsby, and she meant it. I wonder why she said New York looked so good. She's probably really, really missing home after her challenging adventures. Let's keep reading. Grimsby and Gallup waved to her as she hopped off the boat. She staggered about the dock until she got used to walking on land. While they stood and laughed, then she took off her cap and waved to them. Soon she was running along the street and pushing her way through the crowds. They were the same crowds as yesterday, the same noisy men with wheelbarrows, the same rowdy boys, the same grumbling workmen with heavy loads on their backs. But she felt different. She wasn't afraid of them. They were all going about their affairs, just as she was. She ran in and out of the crowds, laughing to herself. She wasn't a rabbit anymore. I wonder what the author means when he says that. She wasn't a rabbit anymore. You may have noticed that throughout the book, Ellen's gone through a lot of different changes. She started off as this shy, bashful girl, but now it seems that she's filling up with some confidence. Let's keep reading. She felt like singing as she climbed up the steps and burst into her grandfather's shop. She pushed past two British soldiers and past her grandfather's shaver, Alexander, who had a big bowl of soap spuds in his hand. She was so happy to be home she would have smiled at the leeches if she had thought to. Grandfather's face lighted up when he saw her. Rising from his couch, he hopped after her to the kitchen and locked the door behind him. I did it, Ellen cried in a loud whisper as she kicked off her shoes and danced about the room. I did it, I did it. She grabbed her mother's hands and they whirled around together while grandfather waved the crutch the carpenters had made him. He would have danced too if he had 2 feet. Over and over they hugged her and said, We're so happy you're home. Pulling chairs up to the big table by the window, they sat down to hear about her trip. You found the farmer's boats without trouble? Grandfather asked in a whisper. Trouble, Ellen groaned. I had nothing but trouble. Trouble all day long. Mother and grandfather looked at her in surprise. They could hardly believe the whispered tale she told them. Perth Amboy was filled with cannon and wagon and trains and hundreds of soldiers, said Ellen. Mr. Shannon told me that General Cornwallis was there in Perth Amboy getting ready to finish off our army before winter set in. That's what we feared, said grandfather gravely. But did you get your message to Mr. Shannon, didn't you? Yes, I did, said Ellen, and now I understand why it's so important for couriers to take messages to the army. I had no idea it would be so hard for you, Ellen, grandfather said. I don't know whether I would have sent you had I known, but I myself never would have been able to get through the lines at all. No one would have smuggled a fat old man on a boat, his eyes twinkled. Mother leaned across the table and smiled at her. I'm proud of you, Ellen, she whispered, but I hope you'll never have to do it again. Well, said Ellen as she thought that over, I think maybe I'd do it again. I don't know. I guess I'd do it again if the boat was sure to go to Elizabethtown. It seemed to Ellen that 2 good things happened to her after her trip to New Jersey. The first happened the next morning when she wrapped her red cloak around her and went to the pump early. Oh no, Ellen's going back to the water pump. Ellen took her place at the end of the line to wait her turn. The women were still talking about the high prices of food and the high prices of firewood. It seemed to Ellen she had been away 100 years and they were still talking about the same old things. Then Dicey came over. Oh no. Her face grew red with anger when she saw Ellen. Are you here again? She cried as she walked slowly and heavily toward Ellen. Yes, I'm here again. Ellen put down her bucket. She was ready to duck out of the way if Dicey came too close, but she was not afraid of her. She folded her arms across her chest. Whoa, Ellen's responding really differently here. Dicey growled, I told you not to come here, Miss Fine Lady. Ellen thrust out her chin and stared back at Dicey. This pump is near my house, she said calmly, and I intend to use it no matter what you say. Dicey stared back, but she came no further. For almost a half minute they stared at her. They stared at each other, then Dicey shrugged and turned away. Let's stop there to answer a question. Why do you think that the author has Ellen run into Dicey one more time before the story ends? So again, why do you think that the author has Ellen run into Dicey one more time before the chapter ends, before the story ends? Thank you for taking the time to answer that. Let's finish up. You're just lucky I'm not ready for a fight, she called over her shoulder, but she walked away. The second good thing happened a month later. Grandfather's silver snuff box came back to him by way of a secret courier. In it was a message that gave them wonderful news. General Washington's small army had crossed the Delaware River from Pennsylvania to New Jersey on Christmas night and had taken the city of Trenton by surprise. Oh, the city of Trenton. That's actually a city in New Jersey. Washington had been able to plan a surprise attack because he had learned so much about the British plans from the patriots in New York and the couriers who had carried their messages. Oh, so it seems that Ellen's message was giving George Washington information about the British soldiers that he used to defeat them. Then he and his army had moved on to another victory at Princeton early in January and had come to fortify winter headquarters in Morristown behind the Watchung Hills in New Jersey. And there was news of Ezra Tolliver. He was a sergeant now and was safe and well in Morristown. Oh, that's Ellen's brother. So we learned that he's now become a general in the army. They hugged one another for joy when they heard that. In the snuff box, there was also a folded piece of paper marked, "For Tolliver." To Ellen's surprise, she found inside a tiny silver locket. She never knew who sent it to her, but since she didn't know, she liked to pretend it was from the general himself. And who knows, perhaps it was. The end. So that was great. I'm really happy that we were able to finish Tolliver's Secret together. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, let's go back to some of the questions that I asked while we're reading, and then I'm going to ask another new question. So if you remember, while I was reading, I asked you guys how Ellen felt about her journey. How did she feel about everything that she had been through? And so if you answered that question, you should have came up with something along the lines of, she felt really proud. She started off as, like I said, a shy girl, but she was able to overcome all these challenges, and now people were telling her that she had done such a good job. So if I was her, I'd probably feel proud in that moment as well. I also asked you guys, why did the author bring back Dicey? Why did the author have Ellen run into Dicey one more time before the story ended? And so if you answered that question, you could have came up with something along the lines of, it allows the reader to see a character change in Ellen. When Ellen first ran into Dicey at the beginning of the story, she was really scared and she ran away. But now she stood up to Dicey and actually made Dicey run away herself. Lastly, I want you guys to be thinking about a theme in this chapter. So before you get done, what was a theme that you thought of as you were reading? So I'll give you a second to think, and then I'll share one myself. So a theme that I was thinking about as I was reading was confidence. I was thinking about confidence because Ellen displays confidence when she retells her story to her grandfather and her mom. She doesn't tell it in a way that makes it seem like she had been suffering or she wants them to feel bad for her, but instead she shares it as something that she accomplished on her own. Another reason why I think confidence is a theme is because her encounter with Dicey. When Ellen runs into Dicey, she's not scared and she doesn't back away. She actually stands up firm, folds her arms, and tells Dicey that this is the pump closest to her house and she's not leaving for any reason at all. That's why I thought confidence would be a good theme in this chapter. All right, so that is the end of Tolliver's Secret. You guys will start reading some new books with Miss Buck, Miss B, and some other teachers that aren't going to be like Tolliver's Secret. They'll be shorter books, but it'll still feel the same. So I look forward to reading with you guys next week, and have a great week.